Conor McGregor won the featherweight title in 2015 and became the double champ in 2016 and fought Floyd Mayweather in 2017, being one of the most lucrative runs to stardom in the history of the UFC. No, not just the UFC, the history of sports. But we all know that story, but how did Conor McGregor become the Mad King? Can he ever retake his crown? Let's find out. What happened to Conor McGregor and why it's the UFC's fault he went down this path? Just as a refresher, after Conor fought Floyd, he started losing it, from coke allegations to cheating on his wife to hitting someone in a bar to throwing a dolly at a bus that a bunch of UFC fighters were on. All of this was in the build-up to McGregor-Khabib, the biggest fight in UFC history, where Conor came off more like a king who had lost his mind than a king coming to free his people. It's almost Shakespearean in a sense, how someone who was once so cold and calculated became this much of a loose cannon, and then he's going up against a stoic Khabib who's like a bald eagle, completely clean and completely stone cold. In 2023, more context was given to this whole situation and build up when the McGregor Forever documentary came out, which is honestly a good project, a little unfocused, but really served to give us some footage on that time where his coach John Kavanagh essentially said training persisted of Conor beating his sparring partners to a pulp, dipping out, and rumors of drinking and partying during camp lingered, and to this point it seemed like Conor had lost his edge. But the thing is, even when the fight actually happened, although Conor lost, it's pretty easy to say that Conor did the best out of everyone that fought against Khabib, from defending takedowns to landing strikes to having moments. Don't get me wrong, Conor got the pulp beat out of him too, but some guys didn't even get to the point of fighting back against Khabib. He had never lost a round to this point, but it seemed as though this loss had almost helped Conor regain his focus. It's a phenomenon that many talk about, but when you start winning and keep winning, sometimes you have to be brought down to remember your hunger, which is common in combat sports. From Tyson to Tyson Fury to John Jones, all talk about the self-destruction due to the fact that for highly ambitious people, one of the worst things that can happen is reaching the mountaintop and finally achieving your goals. For Conor McGregor, that was definitely true. He was never the type to be satisfied by title defenses, and the Floyd fight and Proper 12 satisfied the urge for money, but to do something truly special is what he wanted, something that had never been done before. So by losing, he almost gained a purpose again, especially due to the fact that he was on probation because of the dolly incident, where he was then sentenced to do community service at a church. And I think in seeing that, most Conor fans thought that it was time for the real takeover part 2, because he had completely relocked and he had completely found himself by being in a situation where he was completely taken away from his surroundings, stuck at one point, a church, for that amount of time. He had a lot of time to reflect on what he really wanted. So now we get to the point that I think really defines what would be the most pivotal moment in Conor's downfall, and this is a pretty unanimous opinion that the likes of Chael Sonnen even agree with, and this is Conor Cowboy. So for one, in the build-up, he really was supposed to fight Gaethje at the time, who had just beat Cowboy, but for one reason or another that fight never happened. Conor had been gunning for a fight for a while, and he kept on using the word season as a run of 3 or 4 fights in 2020. So with Cowboy as a tune-up, it really wasn't that significant to him who the opponent was. Either way, he wanted a proper run at the title. The other weird thing about this fight was that it was 2 lightweights fighting at 170, but it also saw a shift in the mentality of Conor. No longer focused on getting in the head of his opponent, but repurposing his obsession into making an absolute masterpiece in the octagon, obsessing over the minute details of mixed martial arts, and not focused on getting into the head of his opponent, but instead of reinventing the wheel and improving his craft. And this seemed like a good solution to his issue. We are not talking about sport or business or any other pursuit. This is fighting, the game where you can literally die. You need to put your mind to a place that can push you beyond your limits. And seemingly though, Conor's interviews and everything we've seen in Notorious and McGregor Forever documentary, if Conor could allocate his mind towards this, it seemed like the proper solution. And given how the fight went, it worked. Starching Cowboy 40 seconds using new techniques like shoulder strikes, as well as catching Cowboy with a head kick, but this all worked against Conor. When you want a tune-up fight, general octagon and fight time is key, to get a feel again of being hit, remembering what it's like to be tired. And because he beat Cowboy in the time that he did, of course it's impressive, don't get me wrong. He even achieved the accolade of the first fighter to get 3 knockouts in 3 different divisions, but there still was a lot of rust there because he didn't actually fight for that long. And here's where the issue of the UFC came in. Conor was gunning for a fight after this, begging the UFC for another fight, and there were so many on the table. Conor Nate 3, Conor Masvidal, Conor Gaethje, hell, even Conor Khabib again, but he just wouldn't get booked. And with this fight taking place in January 2020, we all know what happened in March. But still, during COVID, Conor was still gunning for a fight, and because of this, he was trying to schedule charity boxing matches with pretty much anyone. Getting traction with a Manny Pacquiao charity match, he had decided to just do his own thing. The UFC wouldn't book him, so he was just gonna fight whoever, until traction started building towards a Dustin Poirier charity fight, which seemed like it was actually gonna happen. So naturally, when the UFC saw this, they decided decided that they had to book him, because if they're gonna fight, you're gonna fight in the UFC. Maybe this was all a play by Conor to force their hand, but Conor had finally found his opponent in Dustin Poirier. With all the history of it being a rematch of now two legends who went on to both hold belts and more mature than ever, we saw the same Conor retold, excited for the challenge, constantly speaking of it being a masterpiece of her performance and a true display of mixed martial arts, a fight that was bound to lead to Conor vs Khabib too. Not that Dustin was a slouch, but he always had looked good as a fighter, but not generally considered one of the elite. We all know what happened, with Dustin ripping at Conor's legs and Conor in a heavy boxing stance the whole fight, even getting taken down with ease. It was a really strange performance that led to him getting knocked out, some thinking even out cold. I think there's still a lot of questions about Conor in this fight. He was definitely still rusty in his own words, and the focus of boxing during the camp due to the Manny Pacquiao fight, it all seemingly made sense. I think besides the leg kicks, what's really strange is that Conor hurt Dustin, and in Dustin's own words, he admitted he got hurt really bad, but for whatever reason, Conor seemingly didn't pounce and didn't pick up on the new evolution of MMA with the new calf kick, and went away from his own style that led to him getting knocked out. I'm sure the third fight is still fresh in your mind, with Conor saying he had refocused, him posting himself doing intense workouts, the way over aggressive trash talk, being away from his family during camp. It seemed like Conor was saying, screw this whole masterpiece of MMA thing, it's time to just smash his face. And I feel like it was obvious he was forcing it. He gave probably his worst press conference performance, screaming nonsense, and somehow his Irish accent got thicker in the 9 months in between. Through the documentary, we saw there was definitely concern that his leg was somewhat compromised. That being said, it seemed like there wasn't really clear signs of heavy damage, but based off what they showed, it seemed like there was a slight possibility of something going wrong, but no critical concern. When the fight played out, Conor looked good for about a minute until getting hit with a combination, initiating the clinch, having a decent guillotine only to overcommit to it, which led to moments on the ground where he got smashed. He did land some decent elbows off his back, and of course, he got up, snapped his leg, and seemingly lost his mind. The man did just break his leg, but it's pretty insane he was able to formulate such coherent trash talk in the direction of Dustin, considering his leg had snapped in half. But this period in between 2021 and 2023 with Conor has been an absolute roller coaster. Pretty quickly after being able to move again, we saw him getting really big, clearly using something to repair his leg. I don't know much about steroids, but I think it's pretty safe to say that's not natural. It's been jarring to see his whole face structure shift, seemingly age 15 years in just one, but between getting in fights with MGK, man, if you're gonna get in a fight with someone, MGK, he was also getting into issues at the Miami Heat game, going to combat sports events strong, but more than that, it seemed like he's struggling to speak, developing almost a stutter, and talking complete nonsense at times, maybe because of the drugs or whatever, but as we see him recover, honestly, in the last 9 months, there's some things to look forward to. He's finally training again, and he actually looks kind of decent, training with PFL's Lau Main to Ian Gary. He definitely is moving well, and he even got his black belt in this time, and the interviews are quite a bit easier on the ears than they once were, forming much more coherent thoughts, and that accent is still just getting thicker by the day, but he's implied that he's playing into it a bit, making fun of people criticizing him, but who knows, he might just be trying to play it all off. But he also seemed to be in the same struggle with the UFC of not booking him a fight. Him versus Chandler was supposed to be December, and then it was supposed to be on UFC 300, but that still has not been officially booked. It's almost sad to see him going to events calling out KSI, talking about Jake Paul, boxing Manny Pacquiao again, even fighting Canelo. I know a lot of people are mocking him for this, saying he sounds delusional, but I get a different vibe. I think the man just wants to fight. We see this a lot with fighters recently. Volkanovski just going crazy when you're not fighting, and I think he wants something to do. He seemingly goes to every combat sports event. In a latest interview, he begged the UFC to get this fight done and saying enough is enough. From the UFC's perspective, I don't really get why this fight isn't done. I don't really get why he hasn't been booked against Chandler either. Conor is 35. No one knows how good or not good he is anymore. Why not throw him on 300, get that massive payday, and build up all the starts on the undercard? The only real logic there could be that they want 2 massive paydays with Conor and UFC 300, but still, who knows how many fights does Conor have left, and this would make for an iconic event. Part of me thinks the fight could actually be on UFC 300, and it's all a work, but at this point there's no announcement on main event, so who really knows? But at the end of the day, Conor McGregor is seemingly doing better. After being broken down, it seems that he has that fire again, but the real question is if his body can take it. After all the injuries and all the drugs and alcohol, can his body get into state to really do this for 5 rounds? Personally, I want to believe he can, but who knows if Conor can really compete at this level anymore. I want to believe, but without seeing him in a proper fight build-up and fight itself, it's hard to gauge, but it's really clear between mismanagement, misfortune, Conor has fallen down the path that many before him have. From the likes of Kanye to Mike Tyson, he has become the mad king of the UFC that is desperately looking for his crown. If you want to watch a video on what I think his return fight should be, check this one out. If you enjoyed this video, leave a like, subscribe, and don't forget, we're just getting started, we're going to stay consistent, and I'll see you in the next video.